You may be wondering why this is related to workers' compensation, but it is. Every workers' compensation case will involve an incident investigation. More importantly, the reason this is an important topic is because all of you will be at multiple times in your career investigating incidents, injury incidents, vehicular accidents, all kinds of incidents you will be investigating in your career. Maybe hundreds of investigations before you retire, 20, 25, 30 years from now. First of all, let's talk about the objectives of incident investigations. Our first objective when we do an investigation would be to understand what happened, why it happened, and how it happened. And once we know what happened, why, and how it happened, then that can be used to prevent future incidents. Now, there are some other objectives that I'm going to put up here on the slide that I'm going to say a few words about, but the primary objective, let's combine these first two into one objective. What happened, why, how, and how can we prevent future incidents? That's really what we're about as safety managers, preventing incidents, preventing losses. And investigation is part of that. It's part of that formula for preventing incidents. Our investigations might also reveal any training deficiencies within our company. If we have a fall-related incident, that might be an indicator that we need to ramp up our training for fall protection, for example. Investigations may also identify a program deficiency. It can be part of that continual improvement process that we need to be a part of. Okay, and this is kind of relating it back to workers' comp a little bit, this next objective. Our incident investigations may provide a defense for our company if the company is sued by an injured worker or a third party. Incident occurs, we do our investigation. That might help us avoid lengthy lawsuits or expensive lawsuits. Also related to workers' compensation, our investigation findings may help us contest a workers' comp claim and help us prevent fraud. Say we have a worker who claims he was injured doing XYZ. Well, we do our investigation and there's no evidence that XYZ ever occurred. So once we have done that investigation, we might be able to use it to contest the claim, to controvert the claim, to prevent fraud. And finally, the results of our investigation can be used for subrogating a claim. We talked about subrogation a couple of times throughout the semester. Subrogation occurs when there's a third party involved, a third party that actually caused the damage, caused the loss, caused the injury. The results of our investigation might help the insurance company subrogate the claim and go after that third party that was responsible for the incident. So, these are some objectives of incident investigations. You got to investigate your incidents. A safety program that's not doing a thorough investigation of their incidents that occur, they're not really going to be as effective as they can be. One thing that I've ran into as a safety professional, again, been involved for a long time in the safety profession. I've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of different safety managers. One thing I've ran into is some confusion concerning an incident investigation versus an incident report. To me, they are two different things. A report is more superficial. It doesn't have any detail. Normally, the reports are completed by the direct supervisor of the worker that's involved in the incident, with some involvement from safety managers or project managers. And normally, they're going to be submitted within a few hours of the incident occurring. They're not going to have all the details of a full-blown investigation. And this is okay. We need to be doing reports, these preliminary reports in the initial stage of the investigation process. But where I find, where I've seen a problem is where some companies stop here. They do this preliminary incident report without digging into the details. A real investigation digs into those details. It's not just reporting the facts of what happened, but it's digging in to what happened and trying to get at the root cause of the incident. That's what, as safety professionals, that's what we need to be about, is getting at the root cause. On the next slide is an example of an incident report. This is from an incident that I worked with in 2013. Now, let me just go through some of the different parts of this report. Again, now keep in mind, this is just a report. This is not a full-blown investigation. But in your report, you're going to have, in our case, being a construction company, the name of the project and the job number, date and time of the incident, who was hurt, were they an employee? Yes. Do you think the injured employee will lose time from work? Yes. And at this point, it's just a guess on the part of the person completing the form. I said previously, ideally, it's going to be the injured worker's direct supervisor who completes these reports, these initial reports. In this case, it was me. I received a call on a Friday afternoon that would have the incident. I went down there. I was within about an hour and 15 minutes of the site, so I was able to get down there pretty quickly. And when in that situation, as a safety manager, I don't mind doing it for the supervisor. But you need to get the supervisors involved. And in many cases, it's going to be the supervisor that does this initial report. Yet in this case, I did it, no big deal. But number 4, do you think the injured employee will lose time from work? I responded yes. I didn't know for sure at this point. Again, it's all preliminary. Was the injured employee referred to a doctor or medical facility? Yes. McAllister Regional Medical Center. This occurred Indian Nations Turnpike, McAllister, Oklahoma. Person taking the injured employee to the doctor. Well, that was the supervisor that did this. And he was taken to the clinic almost immediately after the incident occurred, just as soon as possible. They realized it was fairly serious. They realized it wasn't a first aid case. They needed to have a doctor look at it. Was a drug test given? In this case, no, there was not a drug test given. Our company policy was anyone who's involved in an incident takes a post-incident drug test. But in this case, it didn't make sense for the injured worker to take a drug test. He was taken to the clinic. He was diagnosed as having a severely broken ankle and needed surgery. So within an hour of arriving at the clinic, he was in surgery, having his ankle surgically repaired. Could we have done a drug test after the surgery, the day after? We could have, but it would have been a waste of money. When he went in for surgery, he had all the anesthesia, all the other drugs, the prescribed painkillers. That would have resulted in erroneous drug test results. He would have tested positive, maybe for a lot of different substances. It just didn't make sense to do a drug test in this case. And you'll run into that occasionally when it comes to drug testing. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about substance abuse drug testing. But in this case, it didn't make sense. It wasn't done. Employee returned to work. He was not able to return to work for about 3 weeks. We didn't have a lot of information from the doctor about his restrictions, when he would be able to return to full duty, so that was just left blank. All preliminary. Preliminary description of the injury and the body part injured. What the person was doing when they were involved in the incident, and where and how the accident occurred. Again, this is all preliminary. And I'll quit saying that because I've said it about 18 times, I know. I think you've got the point. One thing I do want to say about this, when I first started as a safety manager, I thought, why do we ask that question? What was the person doing prior to the accident? Well, there's a couple of reasons for asking that question. One of the reasons is OSHA. OSHA, on their 301 injury report form, they ask that question. What was the person doing prior to the accident? So that's one reason OSHA asked the question of employers. But the more important reason, I think the reason OSHA asks the question is because sometimes what the person was doing prior to the accident played a role in the accident. And more on that as we go along. So when you see this question, and you will see this on a lot of accident report forms, there's really no need to ponder it too long and wonder why. I mean, it is a question that has to be answered. Don't overthink it. Just answer the question. Witnesses, and getting a list of witnesses at this stage is very important for the actual investigation. Because when we get into the actual investigation, then we're going to go in and talk to all the people involved. What do you think caused the accident? Poor communication, employee walking into blind spot, being too close to suspended load. And when we do the full investigation, what we're doing is testing these hypotheses. This is just a hypothesis at this stage. Did anyone else contribute to the cause of the accident? No. There were other people who were involved, but nobody contributed. Now, one thing about this initial report, some of the things we put in the initial report may be changed once we look at the incident in more detail, once we're more thorough in our investigation. A lot of times nothing will be changed, but there is a potential that the original initial incident report will change. What can be done to prevent the reoccurrence? Again, this is just a guess at this stage in the process. But again, this is an example of an incident report. Now, some companies, this is all they do. They do this, that's their investigation, and they're done. But I don't think that's thorough enough. You need to go beyond just a document like this. Now, there are some injuries or other types of accidents where this would be sufficient. But if you have a fatality or multiple people hospitalized from an incident, you need to go into more detail. This is not going to be an adequate understanding of what happened for most of those types of incidents. Well, let's talk about an investigation. And we're looking at the differences between an injury report or an incident report and an incident investigation. Now, the two go together. An investigation focuses more on why the incident occurred. Identifying the root cause is the goal of this investigation. We want to know what caused the incident. When we know the root cause, then we have a better chance to prevent those types of incidents in the future. Normally, the investigation is going to be completed by safety professionals. There's going to be other people involved, of course. The plant manager or the project manager, the worker's direct supervisor, and the worker involved also. The worker who was injured and other workers who may have been witnesses are all going to be involved. It's a team activity here. You're not going to go in solo and come up with this investigation and your conclusions without working with other people. For some types of incidents, the investigation can take several weeks to complete. And we want to get started as soon as possible. We shouldn't wait several weeks to start the process. If we wait several weeks, we've probably already lost a lot of the information that we need to use during the investigation process. So we want to start as soon as possible, but once we get started, it can take several weeks. Some of the more complex cases, you may bring in outside consultants. OSHA could be involved. When you get a lot of different parties involved, those complex cases are going to take more time to complete the thorough investigation. Now, having said that sometimes it can take several weeks, I want to add that most will be completed within a day or two. Most do not require several weeks. Most do not require the involvement of OSHA, the involvement of the insurance company, or the involvement of expert consultants. There is a place, there is a time when that may be needed, but most of the time it's not. The example we've been looking at with the worker who had the injured ankle, that was pretty cut and dried. Within a day or two, it was all resolved. We did our preliminary report, got him the care he needed, went back and talked to the witnesses who were involved. We recreated the accident to better understand what happened, and it was pretty much cut and dried. And again, tie this back to report. Report is the initial stage of an incident investigation. The full investigation, and one thing else about the full investigation that's important for us to understand, most of the time, the full investigation will not start the same day of the incident. You get that initial report, you get the guy to the hospital or the lady to the hospital, you take care of all of that. Then, in my experience, most of the time that full investigation starts the next day. Now, with the case of the incident in McAllister in 2013, I was pretty much able to get it all tied up in one day. Everybody stayed late. I was able to do my interviews. We were able to do a recreation. And I was able to come up with a completed incident investigation the same day. And what we have on the screen here, again, this is the same incident that we looked at previously in the report format. This is the report format for the full investigation. And once you complete an investigation, however it's formatted, this is just one way of formatting your investigation report. Once it's formatted, then it's going to be submitted to your bosses, the vice president of operations, the president of the company, the chief financial officer, whoever's involved in the process above your pay grade. That's who's going to see this report. So you want to prepare a thorough report. You want to make sure that it's a quality product. But again, here is the incident investigation report that goes along with the initial report that we looked at already. And let me go ahead and just read through this, give you a better idea of what happened. On Friday, September 6th at 2:15 p.m., DC, BW, and CF were using a track hoe to move some bundles of rebar. CF was operating the track hoe. BW and DC were rigging and signaling. After the first bundle was rigged, CF picked the load off the ground about 2 to 2.5 feet and swung the load to his left. It was noticed that there were some loose bars in the bundle that need to be secured. BW signaled to CF to swing the load to the right. At the same time that CF was swinging the load to the right, DC walks into the path of the load, into an area that was blind to the operator because of the bucket and boom of the track hoe. The bucket and boom of a track hoe creates a blind spot, and the injured worker just happened to be in that blind spot. The operator couldn't see him until the last minute when it was too late. The load, which was suspended 2 to 2.5 feet, hit DC in the upper thigh. At this moment, CF realizes what is happening, and he kind of panics. He realizes what's happening and drops the load. Now, if he hadn't dropped the load, DC may have not been injured, but he did drop the load, which ended up hitting DC's ankle and resulting in his broken ankle that required surgery. Again, when you have an incident investigation, you're going to visit the site. Let me go ahead and you're going to visit the site. You're going to recreate, if you can, reconstruct the incident. One thing during the recreation, you don't want to put anyone in a dangerous position during the recreation. Also, during the investigation, third step here, as far as now these steps that I'm numbering, this goes along with this particular incident. Every incident's different, but you need to speak with all the people involved. I spoke with DC. Actually, I didn't speak with DC the same day. I spoke with CF, the operator. I spoke with BW, the one of the supervisors that was on site, and got their stories, was able to take their stories. I recorded their accounts. I interviewed them, took their accounts. And then from their information and kind of seeing how everything was laid out, we were able to determine what the possible contributors were to the accident and some preventative measures that we need to implement in the future to prevent this type of incident. Now, one thing that you want to do when you're doing an investigation, when you're talking to witnesses, you don't want to place blame or assume that somebody was at fault. Your job is to gather the information. That's why you're there, to gather the information. Now, in the law, at the end of the day, this was a simple case. It didn't require a lengthy investigation. It didn't require bringing in an expert consultant. OSHA wasn't involved. The insurance company wasn't involved. We were able to identify possible contributors and some preventative measures that we wanted to take in the future. And one of the preventative measures, anytime we have a suspended load. Now, we did some of this already with cranes, but track hose kind of get overlooked. They pick up loads just like cranes. You need the same procedures with the track hoe that you need with the crane if you're picking up suspended loads and moving those loads that are suspended from the boom. But one of the main things that we got implemented here for all lifting operations, the use of an audible all clear signal. We used air horns, we used radios, we issued an all clear before that thing was picked off the ground. That all clear meant everybody stand the heck out of the way. This thing's going in the air. You need to be out of the drop zone. You don't want to be in a position where you could be hit by the load. Also, to come out of this incident was a greater emphasis on planning. Again, we would plan our crane lifts, but when it came to track hose, we didn't do as good a job of planning. From this point forward, we started emphasizing the importance of planning anytime you have a load in the air. A bundle of rebar can weigh thousands of pounds. It certainly smashed the worker's ankle when it fell on his ankle. Yeah. To make a long story short, he was out of work about 3 weeks a month. He was able to come back with a full recovery. So at the end of the day, we had a happy ending, but it would have been better if we could have prevented that incident. Well, this brings us to a pretty good stopping point for this video. We're over 20 minutes in, and again, I prefer not to burden you with videos that are way too long, break it down into chunks. In the next video, and we're going to have several for this unit, in the next video we'll continue our discussion of incident investigation.